Hello everyone, welcome back to Superhero Rewind Unscripted. It is I, Captain Logan, and joining me as always is Austin, the Day Ghost. It's time for part 8 of our impromptu history of superhero movies. I don't know what happened to the music at the beginning of the show, so apologies for that bizarre crap out that happened there, but we are back, and oh yeah, did I not set it up where you could hear that?
I could, but I wasn't paying attention, so I clearly missed some sort of technical issue.
Well, you know, it's the same every time, so...
Oh, okay.
Well, not that it has the same problem every time, I just mean that it's the same music every time. So I can see why you wouldn't be paying attention to it. Thanks for joining us, folks, for an 8th hour of this. If you've been watching all this time, you guys are super awesome. We really appreciate it. We've been having a ton of fun going through the timeline of superhero movie history, all the way back at the silent film era going up to now. And
we're getting to a point where we're gonna have to have an annual for this series.
Well, I think that annual might be the thing we were talking about, where at the end of this we'll talk about the future of superhero movies. Although we've been doing enough speculation casts lately, we might have already kind of had that conversation.
The annual will just be the Daredevil speculation cast.
Yeah, but you know what? By the time we get to that, we might actually have some things to say.
That is true. There's things happening.
Yeah, we're getting more news about that now, but, I don't want to date this video too much, so we won't talk about that right now. But anyway, welcome live. Welcome if you're watching after the fact. If you are watching live and you'd like to contribute to the conversation, as always, you can leave a super chat in any dollar amount. That guarantees that we'll talk about whatever aspect of this you're interested in. But, of course, we'll answer regular questions and comments as we go along. So interact with us. We'd love to get your 2 cents, and feel free to correct us on year mistakes and anything that we might forget about, because as disclaimer I always put in at the beginning of this, we haven't prepared for these. This is just a laid back podcast talking about the history of superhero movies, going from memory and with whatever we might have read up on and looked at recently. So we're not looking at Wiki or Google or anything as we're doing this. It's a closed book test that we've not studied for, and this is the 8th part of that. Last time we basically got up to 2016, and I said that I kind of wanted to maybe back off and hit a couple of things before 16 that we didn't talk too terribly much about, Austin. But the more I'm thinking about it, I don't know how much more either of us is really going to have to say about things like Age of Ultron and like 2015 things. Like, I think maybe we've said our piece enough on that. But if there's anywhere else, anything else you want to mention about that or run with that, maybe we'll cheat before I start the clock.
Well, 2015 is such a nothing year theatrically. That's a big year for superhero TV.
Yeah, because is that when Daredevil starts?
Daredevil and Jessica Jones are both 2015.
Yeah, and you could argue that that's maybe the height of, not that we're going to talk too much about TV, of course. That could be a whole other series, but it would be much shorter because I don't know how much Austin would have to say about the TV side of things. But anyway, it could be argued that that's also the peak of Arrowverse, because you've got Arrow and Flash on at the same time, and Flash is, I think, already in its second season maybe, and like they're starting to greenlight,
I think so,
and bring new shows in. Is it 2016 when Supergirl starts? We're into an era where I was broadcasting and talking about all of this stuff as it was going, and it just jumbles up in my brain now. So like weirdly, I'm probably gonna look like much more. I don't want to say, I never like to call myself an expert, but I'm probably going to look a lot more well versed in the earlier stuff than the later stuff, which is really ironic because I've talked about all of this as it's happened, but like my brain is turned to mush at this point. It all kind of runs together.
Yeah, it's all just a bunch of slop.
Yeah, I mean some of it's cool, but some of that also is just getting older and stuff, right? Where, like, I haven't lived with this stuff as long. I haven't rewatched it as much, and so it doesn't stick with me as well. So I'm gonna have some memory issues, I'm sure, with some of this stuff. I'm a little nervous about it. It was like, Cap, how do you not remember when that came out?
Yeah, I feel pretty confident on the movie side, but I have no idea about anything TV-wise.
Well, that's fine, because luckily
we're only talking about movies.
That's not even what we're doing with this show. Okay, well, let's go ahead and start the clock. If anybody has any aspect of anything before 2016 that we haven't hit enough that you'd really like us to revisit, feel free to bring that up as we go along, and we can backtrack some. But why don't we just start right away with the DCEU side of things with BVS, and then I'm sure Civil War will come back up. We talked about that a little bit, but there's still, I think, more to mine there. And
we got Deadpool in 2016.
Deadpool, yeah. And I feel like there was another big thing that year.
Doctor Strange.
Is that 2016? And then Apocalypse.
No. Oh yeah. No. Okay. No. You're right.
Right? Because they rushed that 2 years after Days of Future Past. Let me go ahead and start the clock because we're cheating. We've already started our conversation. The clock begins right now.
We've already covered 2016. We can just skip it now. Those are the movies that happened.
We still should probably get in the weeds with it a little bit. So Austin, I've been opening a lot of these with with kind of a hardball question for you. So I'm going to do that again here. And my question to open this episode, starting with BVS, is why do you think, and this is all speculation, and we don't have that pseudo tell-all book for DC like we kind of do for MCU now, right? Why do you think Warner's and DC put all their eggs in the Zack Snyder basket? Why was he their golden boy?
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure. I guess they went
curveball.
They went the Man of Steel route and then stuck onto the train because it didn't completely bomb, I guess.
Well, let's go backwards for a second. Even with Man of Steel, is that an odd choice in the first place?
As Snyder on Superman, you mean?
Snyder on any big DC tentpole thing after Watchmen kind of just does okay.
I mean,
it's almost like they're still looking at 300 and going, well, we had a giant success from him at one point. Like, maybe that'll happen again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you have Nolan involved, too. So yeah. I'm sure that also helped.
But he's got so much creative control even from the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
It's just kind of shocking. Like, I could sort of see it if they were treating him like Marvel does with a lot of its directors later, like a workman director, where here's a script we had written for you. You have to just kind of shoot it. You don't really have a lot of say in stuff. But it wasn't like that. I mean, he was plotting, especially after Man of Steel. He had this big, giant plan that, as far as I understand it, was kind of all him. And he was having writers, kind of, I don't even remember names of people anymore because it's been so long. But like, who wrote BVS and Justice League?
That's Terrio.
Terrio, there it is.
Just Terrio, yeah. who's the writer of Argo, I think, with Affleck. Like Affleck brings him on
Yeah.
because that starts as Goyer.
Yeah, gone are the days where we hear a writer, sometimes even a director, but like a writer from a really great like independent or smaller project or like an art house project on a big like popcorn superhero movie, and we go, oh boy, that's gonna be great. Like you really can't be sure of that anymore.
Yeah, but I mean, Bruce Campbell, I've heard, has this thing that he talks about. You know, the movie Congo, the Michael
Yeah,
Crichton adaptation,
I've never seen
where
that, but yeah.
because everybody hates that movie, and he's like, okay, let me back this off and say, we have this movie. I forget who the director is, but it's got this director that did this thing. It's based off of a Michael Crichton book, and he just did Jurassic Park. You have, Tim Curry. You got Bruce Campbell. You got all these like kind of bigger B movie people. What's the part of that you hear and think, this is going to be a giant bomb? And I guess DC, it's probably, we have Christopher Nolan, like hot off of the Batman movies. We're going to take Superman into that direction. That did really well for them. You have Snyder, who, yeah, like Watchmen wasn't a giant success, but like 300 was. And I think they're working on 300 too around this time, aren't they?
Which he
Around
doesn't
Man of
direct.
Steel? Yeah, but like they're still continuing that. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
then you have David Goyer,
I don't remember
who's
when that came out. Was
done
that
a ton
like
of stuff. I
15,
want to say it's
14,
around the same
15?
year as Man of
Man of
Steel, but I could
Steel?
be wrong. Uh, it's like I feel like there's like enough there that you can go, okay, I'm a studio person.
But after
Maybe
how
this makes sense to me.
polarizing Man of Steel is, it's a little baffling that they stay on that train. Is it not?
No, that's true.
Or that they don't rein him in to some degree. And maybe they kind of tried to,
Hmm.
because it's hard to say if some of the attempted course correction where clearly Snyder and maybe even other people involved with that project, Terry or whoever, are responding to complaints about Man of Steel, but not really understanding people's issues with it exactly. Where it's kind of just superficial changes.
Well, we know
Uh,
the shared universe aspect is all WB as well.
yeah,
It's like there is like that studio overhead
but
that's
that also
really
seems like
weighing
the
down.
kind of thing that Snyder would love.
Oh yeah.
So I'm sure they didn't have to twist his arm for that. In fact, I would bet you money that some of that building to Justice League stuff still happens even if it wasn't mandated.
Mhm. No, that is possible. Um, but then, I mean, the big thing obviously is okay. Man of Steel, it did well, but like not as well. Like it was divisive. So then you bring in Batman, and then Batman will save the day. It'll make $1 billion because we've never seen those two characters on film together.
Yeah, and I could see them saying, well, let's take whatever they're already working on and let Snyder stay there, but kind of force Batman into it, uh, in order to, make everybody happy, and not have to start anything over and get things out whenever the like planned times were. But that's not really what happened because they weren't in the middle of anything yet. Like they made Man of Steel. They were kind of waiting to see how that would go, and then the plan was a Man of Steel 2. But it's not like they wrote anything back to back. It's not like they were already they already had anything built or scene shot for a second movie or anything. So like if they had wanted to scrap Snyder and put somebody else there and still add Batman, they could have done that.
Yeah, I mean that is
They
true.
they waited an extra year, and I know I said this on one of the earlier videos, but and I haven't heard anybody else talk about this, so this might be one of those. Just I had a weird dream that one time, but I'm pretty sure this really happened, where Warner's was trying to like rush out a second movie the very year after Man of Steel.
Well, I think too, you could also look at it from a studio perspective and say, Begins isn't a giant money maker. Maybe like they just needed that movie to kind of kick it off, and then the next movie would take off,
Sure.
like Dark Knight with Batman vs Superman.
But that's so misguided when you see A, how polarizing it is, and B, how unhappy they were with the box office return. Because Man of
Hmm.
Steel made money, it did well, but reportedly not close enough to what they wanted. So like they were disappointed with that. It's just I can't think of another time in history before this. You see it afterwards. You see some failing upwards happening in both Star Trek and Star Wars land, but with superhero movies especially, I can't before this remember a time where a movie didn't do as well as the studio wanted to, and then they gave the guy more free reign, or seemed to. I'm so confused by that.
Well, not only that, but it's not like we just had BVS. Like Suicide Squad's the same year too.
Well, that's a good point.
And that was even originally supposed to be more connected because Steppenwolf was supposed to show up in the third act.
Yeah, and I've always been fuzzy on how much influence Snyder had on that project.
I imagine,
because
he's a producer. I imagine he was at least like talking with them the whole time, kind of similar to Wonder Woman.
I guess what I mean is, was Suicide Squad in any part his idea to do next?
That I'm not sure.
Because that seems so in line with his thinking right then, where we want to go for the like hardest edge DC stuff we can. We're pushing against tradition. We want to make stuff about anti-heroes. We want to do a lot of deconstruction of superhero stuff instead of making the like definitive version of these things on screen, which is why it didn't speak to a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
And by it, I just mean the DCEU in general, until they started going a little bit more, brighter and more traditional. And even then, didn't bring in everybody and was always just disjointed and never felt like a cohesive world.
I mean, it could just be, them going to different directors and being like, okay, this is what we have. What do you want? And maybe Ayer just said Suicide Squad. I'm not sure.
So Robert in the comments there, thanks for the comment, says, I don't think Snyder was very involved with Suicide Squad, but WB did rush it. The question is, with that, why? Were they just in such a, and I'm sure this is the answer, Austin, were they in such a rush to compete with Marvel on the same playing field, on their level, that they're like, we have to get 2 out a year just like they are, no matter what it is?
Possibly. It's also something completely different from what Marvel's making. Obviously, they then tried to cram it into being a Guardians movie, but like from premise alone, like it's nothing like what Marvel's doing at that point. Especially when you want to go like the darker route.
Yeah, well, and that's one of those movies, and I guess the biggest one that some fans are still asking for a director's cut for, like hoping against hope that Ayer's cut would be much better than even the unrated or the rated R version with some extra scenes put in that still don't explain some of the big plot holes that I had with it. But it's But regardless of what that movie would have looked like, it's still like really unfortunate and sad that they kept going to the drawing board the way they did.
Mm. Yeah, no, I mean, you've talked about it a million times, but
yeah,
like every single movie is a reaction to the movie before it.
And whenever they come out, they feel like a product of a different time that's been in a drawer for a while. And so with that, even though that comes out the same year as BVS, they panic real hard and they re-edit it. Mm-hmm. Famously with the editors of the trailer. Mm-hmm. And they just make an unadulterated mess.
Yeah, one of the worst superhero movies ever made. Like, and far worse than BVS.
Which is funny, because at the time when it came out, I found myself feeling like, even though it was a giant mess and it was one of the worst structured things I've ever seen, like, and let me say this too, it feels worse now that we have the Suicide Squad, because it juggles its characters so much better and it introduces its characters so much better, and it feels like it's almost making fun of that movie in the way it introduces an entire team that it then scraps. Mm-hmm. Because that movie introduces a whole team and you don't care about them, and it feels like a million years before you get into the actual story of the movie. So that whole thing is hilarious. But I'm sorry, I've lost my train of thought.
That's okay. But yeah, and like the Suicide Squad is an actual Suicide Squad premise.
Oh, I know what I was going to say. When that came out, I still found myself feeling like it was the best of the three. which wasn't saying anything and was probably kind of hyperbolic, and like it's, I don't know, I use the word objectively too much. I feel like it's certainly not a better movie than Man of Steel, but in weird ways it feels almost less cynical than that, like in retrospect. Because it's at least not monkeying around with a character like Superman in the way that is, and it's not as... It's got a couple of big plot holes, but it's weirdly still a little more straightforward than Man of Steel.
mean,
and
that
it's not
just comes down to
and it's
what
not
the fan
humorless like that movie was. So like in certain ways it's kind of better, but it's weird comparing them.
Yeah, I mean, I think that just depends on what you're a fan of, because like you read Ostrander and then you watch that movie and you're like, oh, this is a puppy that I love getting beat with a baseball bat.
Sure, you're right. Some of that depends on how you
So
feel
it's
about
just like,
source
yeah.
material and stuff. But
I think BVS out of the three is the best, just because there are things in it that are like enjoyable to watch. And yeah, like a lot of it's a mess.
a better
but, like,
spectacle than the rest of it, and it can maybe be just from our perspective as people that can't take a lot of that movie seriously. I don't want to speak for you. I can't take a lot of that movie seriously.
No, and it's not boring.
And so,
which is my big thing.
There are swaths of it that are for me, but
which is why I would rather watch the theatrical cut.
See, and I'm in that place at this point too. And you know, there's people that feel like that movie got fixed with the director's cut, and I'm like, I kind of feel like it just got longer. Like, there's a couple of minor things that make more sense, but it.
But even then, like, I don't know that it actually fixes like any of the issues. Like, I know one of the big ones people talk about is the whole the government like shoots all the terrorists at the beginning and then they blame it on Superman.
Yeah.
But when you watch the extended cut, they shoot all of them, take all the bodies, pile them into like a big stack, and then burn them with a flamethrower. That's just as dumb as the first one. It's just longer.
Yeah, no, it's dumb, but it at least gave you something. And so when you're just completely confused and discombobulated walking out of the theater, and then a few months later you get to see that, you're like, well, at least there's an explanation. And so it immediately makes you lower your standards. You're like, at least they explained this.
Yes, I guess Superman piled all of them, and then he envisioned them, and then they also just happen to have bullet wounds in them that you could also find if you did an actual autopsy.
Robert says the extended cut of BVS is too long, but it is the better cut. The theatrical cut is more messy, but they're both so messy that I would still rather watch the shorter one.
Yeah, they have like all the same issues. It's just one's longer.
But what I was gonna say is, for somebody like me that can't take a lot of that movie seriously, especially once you get to, I mean, really all the way through, and it's so self-serious, and I don't want to just review that movie again. I did a 5-hour written project on that, which I think broke me and made me want to never write about superhero movies ever again. I'm not saying I won't. I might at some point come back and do it and do another one occasionally. I haven't in 2 years. Some of it is life stuff, and some of it is, I don't know. That was a project, Austin. But for somebody like me that can't take very much of that movie seriously, when I'm enjoying it, it is on almost like a Gotham kind of level. And it at least has that. I can't do that with Man of Steel or Suicide Squad. Like, Suicide Squad is not funny bad. BVS or like bad good or whatever. BVS has those moments.
Yeah, it's got like Batman bashing Superman over the head with a sink. That's funny.
But it is still frustrating because there are some good ideas there. At least thematically. I mean, it's very much the thing I have with McFarlane and Spawn, where when you hear McFarlane talk about what the ideas of his story are supposed to be, you just wish he'd given it to somebody who knew how to write. Like, I have that a little bit.
That's also Man of Steel. Like,
that's even more so Man of Steel.
That's even more so Man of Steel. Yeah, because it's like
I love the nature nurture stuff in that movie.
Well, the Krypton stuff is genuinely interesting, but they don't do anything with it. Like, it's all. Like, they throw it out, but the Krypton section of that movie is so focused on Jor-El riding a dragon and then the ships exploding behind him and, like, all this stuff, and it's not actually discussing any of its ideas. Like, it just kind of throws them out there, and it's like, this is a thing, bye. And, it's a mess.
So I don't know. Let's back off and get more to the history side because we're getting dangerously close to just
Just reviewing these
reviewing
movies.
these
Yeah.
movies again. Yeah, but I mean, it's kind of a testament to the awkwardness of them that it's really difficult to bring them up and not just go back to. God, it's weird that you couldn't nail Superman. You couldn't nail Batman and Superman being in a movie together. That was I mean, the reason that movie made as much money as it did was because it was the same sort of novelty that later on we would get with the multiverse thing with different movie franchises coming together, like with No Way Home, right? And like we're about to get with Deadpool 3, and like you got with, Crisis with the Arrowverse. Like, it was like that for people, where, and it feels kind of quaint and, of another time now. It's so weird. Like, it feels like last Thursday to me, but it also feels like a million years ago at the same time, because there was a time where we didn't know if we would ever see Batman and Superman on screen together. And now that's just a given, and yet we screwed it up and we've never seen it done well. And so the whole thing is just awkward.
That's the novelty that I talked about with the first Avengers movie, where it's built around that, but then BVS tries to do more. It skips the Avengers and jumps straight into the Age of Ultron. That's just a disaster and a mess.
Well, I think,
Except we didn't have that first part.
yeah, I mean, I think you have two ingredients that make it so that your souffle not only does it rise but kind of explodes. Maybe it does rise and then it just blows up, right? One of them is you have a guy at the helm that just wants to see cool, violent action and wants to make something really serious, but just is not a storyteller and doesn't know how to do that. So you get this really immature, in my mind anyway, like dark for the sake of dark, big action piece that's again like really self-serious and pretending like it matters more than it does, and this is part of the reason I guess that happens. And then you're also trying to follow in the footsteps of Nolan at the same time. I mean, there's not a more anachronistic director to Christopher Nolan than Zack Snyder.
Yeah, well, I think too, in terms of building this out, the worst thing that Snyder does right from the beginning is that he has the same take of for the entire Trinity. Um, where Superman's got his whole weird relationship thing with Lois, where if Lois dies, he takes over the world or whatever. Batman's lost Robin, so he becomes like a darker serial killer Batman, and Wonder Woman loses Steve Trevor, so she like abandons the world. Like he has like the same take for all three of them, and like none of them are like really that interesting or heroic.
Yeah, and then that's interesting, like, because then the question I would pose after you say that is and it's weird because they're not the definitive. They don't feel like the definitive versions of those characters, partly because that's his take with them. But under a better director's camera or a better writer's pen, could that have worked as interesting character parallels? What I mean is the problem really the concept, or is it the execution?
I would say both, because I think if you're gonna do it, don't do it for all three of them. Like they're all too similar.
Yeah, and then I have a hard time not just throwing back at you you can make anything work argument. Like, that's not what I would do.
Mhm.
But, if you gave that to somebody like James Gunn and said you're forced to have all three of these characters have like sidekicks or lovers that tragically died, and that informs the kind of heroes they are now, like, could he have done something with that story? Or Christopher Nolan or somebody, maybe.
I mean, then it would be like something like Guardians, where they've all lost someone, but they're all different characters. So in that sense, like, yes, because you're writing them as different people. They just didn't really do that, in my opinion.
And then I don't even know what that story is. It's like, because you'd almost have to put all three of, and I realize that Wonder Woman is in BVS, but you'd almost need to make BVS a like Trinity movie or a Justice League movie in the first place, where the three of those characters would have to be introduced more together and then come together as a team to kind of realize all together, okay, individually we have not been acting heroic, but maybe the three of us together can find that, like in ourselves.
Well, I've always thought that Wonder Woman
that
like
could
it should have
work.
just been a Trinity movie, and you bump up her role a little bit to like female main lead.
Yeah.
Sorry, I
Well,
couldn't get it out.
it kind of takes us back to the point that we made a couple episodes ago, that maybe you should have just started with a Justice League movie in the first place. Like, it seems like every time we try to correct retroactively Warner Brothers mistakes, it all goes back to well, you rushed things too much getting to Justice League and making too many things a team building movie. Maybe you should have just started with your team movie and then made your individual movies. Even if it's a Trinity movie and then a Justice League movie. I never thought about that. You could have done Man of Steel, a Trinity thing, and then let Batman and Wonder Woman have their solo movies, and then made a Justice League movie. And yeah. I don't know that's a bad, that would have been a bad chorus, a bad collection of movies.
Yeah, and I mean, I also think maybe you could have done Man of Steel, a Trinity movie, and then Justice League. And if done well, you could have done it right.
Well, because then you'd have a trilogy right there. Mm-hmm. And Snyder kind of tried to treat later on like Man of Steel, BVS, and Justice League like a trilogy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. No, and I mean, in terms of the way we talk about like them kind of rushing things, like you start with Superman and then you introduce two more heroes, and then Justice League introduces two more, so like it's not that crazy.
Yeah, well, and all of those characters were slated to have solo movies, and Aquaman got his but Cyborg didn't. And then there was supposed to
Flash
be
eventually got it.
I think we would be remiss if we didn't bring up such as that was. But I think we would be remiss if we didn't bring up the whole Unite the Seven slogan.
Well, that like there is an explanation for that.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, just because they only did it for Aquaman, it's talking about the seas. It was never talking about the Justice League in that way.
Is that true?
Yeah, the only thing that ever had the Unite the Seven thing is Aquaman, and the idea is supposed to be Unite the Seven Seas.
I didn't know that.
Which is weird, but
well,
that makes sense.
And it confused everybody, and obviously me up until right now, because you've just blown my mind with that. I've never heard that. I thought I remembered, and keep in mind, we're talking almost a decade ago.
And it also could have just been they retroactively said that, but
I thought I remembered, and you're probably right. I'm not arguing with you, but I thought I remembered seeing like several of those characters' heads with the Unite the Seven thing over them. Was it just Aquaman? Mm-hmm. And Plush DX says it means both. I would be very
it's kind of double entendre in that way.
I honestly, I gotta say, I don't believe that there was not intended to be a seventh member of the Justice League. I don't believe that.
Yeah,
you can't convince me of that unless I got in a room with Snyder or Terriers, and even then, they're making up some crap retroactively when they talk about this stuff. So I still wouldn't be 100% sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they were talking about doing like Green Lantern and stuff, and and he was supposed to even be in that, like in the Snyder cut, but I think WB made him do the Martian Manhunter scene instead.
Okay, I was gonna say everything about that seemed retroactive, and it didn't seem like they had ever intended on using Martian Manhunter. And the idea that that character was always Martian Manhunter is preposterous. Like it's completely unbelievable. Cool casting choice. I mean, I would have liked that. But and I would have liked it seated in Man of Steel, but it's not.
No, and it's just the same twist as the Supergirl show.
Robert says Cap is partially right. There were plans to have 7 members by the end of Justice League. So they would have had like the 6 that come together, and then at the end they add a 7th member, like Green Lantern or somebody shows up in the you know what, that wouldn't surprise me because they did that with Wonder Woman with BVS. So it's like you have some other character just show up at the end.
Oh God.
Austin, so again, it's impossible to talk about this without just going to what would you have done differently. But I do want to ask you that question. Like, what do you think is the main? And maybe it's obvious, but I will ask you this in case you have a different answer than me. What do you think were the main, like, 1 or 2 missteps that Warner's made that got us to the place we are now where they're having to full-on reboot?
Making Man of Steel.
Making it the way they made it?
Yes.
So is
Man
it
of Steel.
so is it the 1-2 punch of you put Snyder on it and you didn't have enough new blood? Or is it more one over the other? Because I've always complained about the new blood thing. You've got Nolan, who reluctantly comes back, doesn't even seem interested in the project, and I've always thought that about it. That like,
well, I mean, my biggest heartbreak thing is they rejected a Matthew Vaughn Superman.
and then Zimmer and Goyer.
Mm-hmm. No, my biggest heartbreak thing with that is they rejected a Matthew Vaughn Superman movie, which would have been way better. But this is the world we live in.
There were a couple of interesting sounding pitches.
Oh yeah, I mean, Superman's one of those things that I think has just been pitched a billion times.
Well, who was it that had the cool like trilogy that would have ended in like the far-flung future with Superman like really old?
I think that's part of Vaughn's pitch, but I think his pitch was like a 7-film epic. Like it was like,
oh, that's
if I remember
right.
correctly.
It's all running together again for me now, but I thought there was maybe something with like a Mark Millar pitch, maybe.
Well, Mark Millar was a part of the Vaughn thing.
Okay, there you go.
Because they worked together a lot.
I just couldn't remember if that was the same pitch or not. Yeah, you're right. It wasn't 3; it was 7. That whole thing sounded potentially great. If they could have gotten away with it.
Start with the destruction of Krypton and end with the Earth's sun going supernova, if I remember correctly.
Well, and you know me.
It's going to be like the entire, life story of Superman, which I get from a business perspective that you would go, I don't want to green light this gigantic thing. But, like, it's also Matthew Vaughn, and I love Matthew Vaughn.
Yeah, and it's Superman, so, like, it's not a safe bet, but if that first movie is really popular, then you've got a Harry Potter on your hands. Then 7 movies is not crazy, and It is Warner Brothers making it, so it's a little surprising that they didn't consider harder taking that risk and go, well, 7, 8 movies work for Harry Potter. Like Harry Potter, they made that first movie, and if that hadn't been successful, they would have just scrapped it. Why not try that with Superman? And I was just going to say this. You know me, I've always wanted a standalone Krypton movie, so like starting with that would have excited me to no end. And you also could have had a sleeper hit on your hands where that movie does not have to move heaven and earth for that franchise to eventually be really popular. You just don't want to throw too much money at it too fast, but you could have had a Batman Begins on your hands. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Where like it does well enough to make a sequel, and the sequel's insane. Yeah,
absolutely.
They should have done that.
I know
they should have done that.
That's my big DC. Like, man, why couldn't we have gotten that? And if you wanted to do the shared universe thing, you're doing a 7-film epic that takes place, in this gigantic time period. Like, it would be so easy to be like, hey, can we fit things into this?
Well, yeah, and then you'd have all these potential.
And you're working when your writer on it's a big comic book guy.
You'd have all these potential backdoor pilots, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Like
no, exactly.
it would basically be like Man of Steel on steroids, just as far as starting with Superman to build a shared universe, where it's its own giant epic franchise, and then you just introduce major characters in minor roles here and there, and then you see which ones really stick with people, and then you give them movies. And also that that would have been now we're just doing all this backward speculation stuff, but that would have been a really cool approach that would be so different from what Marvel was doing, but potentially just as successful, because Marvel's approach was totally linear, really up until, with the exception of the first Captain America movie, but even that was rooted in present day. Up until Captain Marvel, they were totally linear. It would have been really interesting to go, we've got a 7-film epic, it's going to take place over, like, dozens, if not 100 years, right? Mm-hmm. And then in the middle of all of that, you could do movies that took place anytime you wanted to, and you just structure it around this big epic, and then you have all these other movies in the same continuity with different characters. Genius.
Mm-hmm.
It could be
like
great.
Even like, let's say you get like 3 movies into Superman, and you go, okay, let's do the Batman and Superman movie. Let's put Batman in the Superman movie. There's no reason you can't then go back and do like, you know, like a Batman Begins type thing with that version, you know.
Yeah, they should have done that. And it's kind of sad that we're not going to see anything like that, because I'm hoping, obviously, that this reboot that Gunn is working on is going to finally be what the DCEU should have been in the first place. Let me read Robert Wild's comment, because it's related to this. He says, the DCEU overall is now a mixed bag at best. Now we're pretty much back to square one with Superman Legacy, right back to where we started. Hopefully it's great. I mean, beginning with Superman is just kind of, I think, almost indisputably the right place to start. So, like, they at least got that right. Maybe the only thing DCEU 100% got right was, well, you start with Superman, if you're not going to start with Justice League anyway. But
or you start with Creature Commandos.
Yeah, but I do wish that it wasn't as, like, kind of potpourri as it is. With all these announcements of, like, kind of random disparate projects, and hopefully the whole thing comes together and it's going to be great. But something like this would have excited me a lot more if the slate was, well, okay, we're making a Superman movie, and then we're going to have all these other things that are in some way very related to that, as opposed to just, like, kind of throwing darts in all these different places.
But see, that's what I like about it. Like, I would have been so much more bored if he got up and went, okay, here's our slate. Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, Aquaman, Flash, Justice League. I'd be like, okay, that's what Marvel did. The fact that they are just being like, hey, we want to make an Authority movie. Here's an Authority movie. James Mangold really wants to make Swamp Thing. Here's Swamp Thing. That's what excites me. That's the way this genre needs to be moving, is, hey, we actually want to make this thing, let's make it.
No, that's fair, but I guess you can have your cake and eat it too, but I just have to see how it's all going to work out. I would have been much more excited about that slate if very little of it was all in the same continuity, where it's like, if you're gonna make it shared universe and all these things are supposed to be interconnected, I hope all that works. I don't know. It's just I guess you can't make me happy, because what I kind of wish,
an angry man yelling at clouds.
What I wish the slate had been was, yeah, we're making a Superman movie. Just wait and see about everything else we're making. You know what I mean? Like, I just wish they had announced anything, honestly.
And that's fair too. But I'm interested in.
I think that's ultimately what I'm getting at.
Yeah, fair enough.
But I don't know. It's just you tell me about that Matthew Vaughn thing again, because I'd forgotten about some of that, and I'm like, I wish the slate was, we're making a bunch of Superman movies, and then you gotta wait and see all the other stuff we're doing.
Yeah, and there's talk that Vaughn is going to be the one that does Authority, and I would be very happy if that happens, because maybe it'll live up to some of his X-Men material. Yeah,
but we got to get back to this to the history stuff. But I'll just respond to that real quick and say, with things like that, and this is part of the problem for me with. And I'm hoping Gunn is the guy, but just for me personally, with my own taste, just to go to a selfish place for a minute, a lot of the stuff he's interested in is just not the stuff I'm interested in. So I need to go to an Authority movie before I care about an Authority movie. Like, I just don't care.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I don't care about.
I'm sure I will,
either.
But
the fact that he walked up and was that excited about the Authority is what makes me go, "Oh, cool! I'll check this out."
But I care about it little enough that when you go, well, it'd be cool if Vaughn got that. I'm like, I don't care who makes that. Like, I just have to see it. You know what I mean? Like,
Well, I just like Matthew Vaughn, so I'm like, he makes movies I like. He'll probably make something I like.
yeah, I wish he'd get out of spy stuff because it's just not my thing, and he's a versatile enough director that I know he can do other stuff. So like, he's got this movie coming out that looks like just more Kingsman, but it's not Kingsman, and I'm like, can you do something else? Like, I don't know.
And as a spy fan, I'm like, this is great, but also like, yeah, you've done like 5 spy movies in a row. I'm cool if you do something else.
Exactly.
But anyways,
so I think one of the things that really didn't help BVS, besides the fact that everything about it was counterintuitive, like almost literally everything. I mean, it feels like a 14-year-old's pitch for a Batman Superman movie. Just the fact that Versus is in the title makes you go, okay, so he's just a little kid reading comics, right? Like it feels like such a fan film kind of pitch. And then you get like the goofiest title imaginable for one of the biggest movies ever made. And it rubbed me and a lot of other people kind of the wrong way. And I was certainly open to it being great and got more excited than I thought I would by the initial trailer, because at least it looked really stylized. Like, I like the look of it a lot. Initially anyway. And but one of the things that didn't help it certainly was that if memory serves, Civil War went first, did it not?
No. BVS is March.
Was BVS first?
Civil War's May.
Okay, I could not remember what the order was.
Yeah, so it was like, oh my god, this movie's a disaster, and then, oh, Civil War.
Oh, you know what? Now that you say that. Yeah. I couldn't remember. I saw him in such close proximity, because I got to see Civil War a couple weeks early. And so I just couldn't remember what the order was, because I probably saw him 2 weeks apart from each other.
Yeah,
or like 3
though,
or 4 weeks apart from each other.
BVS is also like a few weeks after Deadpool, so like there is that. Like, obviously it's not the same like hero versus hero thing, but people were on a high after that too.
Yeah, like, what do you think the expectations were for like the average person for that movie?
For Deadpool or Batman?
For BVS, like, with how divided people were on Man of Steel, like, obviously, you know, everybody was going to go see it because it was such a big deal that you were putting those characters together, but, like, you know, how mixed was the excitement? Because I seem to recall it being kind of mixed.
Yeah, I mean, I, like, was never excited for that movie. Same with Suicide Squad. They were both movies I went, oh, this is going to be bad. But I was also like out of high school at that point, so like I feel like it was a lot easier for me to gauge what some of the like general public were thinking when, you know, everyone in my school was talking about it. That was my experience. I was like, this looks bad, and then I watched it and it was.
Well, we all know the, you know, bizarre experience I had with that movie.
Yeah, exactly. I also had one of the most uncomfortable experiences watching Suicide Squad, because I went with my cousin, and he and I were gonna go, and my mom, it was like when Bart Simpson is forced to hang out with Ralph. My mom made me take our neighbor and his friend as well, and we walk out. My cousin and I were like, "Oh my god, that was like the worst movie ever," and our neighbor walked over and he was like, "That was great." And my cousin and I was like, oh man.
Don't you think that year in general kind of just set the stage for so much to come? Again, what like with what I called last time the Twilight Zone period, like, because you've also got Star Wars that year.
No, that's 2015.
Is it 15? I remembered it being close to the same time.
But
you know what I'm saying? It all runs together for me. I don't remember when any of this happens.
2015. So
it's, yeah, that's why I thought it was close.
That's probably why it bleeds over. But no, the more I'm thinking about it, because I always think of 2016 as being a good year for superhero movies, and I'm starting to question that because you got Deadpool, which people like. You have BVS, which we'll just say is divisive. You have Civil War, which people liked. You have Apocalypse that no one liked. You had
Yeah.
Suicide Squad that made a lot of money, but also nobody liked.
Yeah.
And then you had Doctor Strange that I think the general consensus is that it's okay.
But could have been cooler, could have been weirder.
Yeah, and I know people that are like Doctor Strange.
That was one
like,
of
one
the
of their
first
best movies. And I know a lot of people that think it's just okay.
Well,
So,
I feel like that was one of the first Marvel movies where people started really talking about like the formulaic nature of them.
Possibly, I don't know. From just kind of like random people that I talked to about it, a lot of them outside of our like geek culture stuff, were talking about it like it was very different. Like I remember walking out of it with my mom, and she was like, "Oh, like that wasn't really like a Marvel movie at all." And I'm like,
Interesting.
I mean, it is.
It is, yeah.
It's got a very different third act. I'll give it that.
Which is awesome, but it starts in such a similar place where it's just kind of your typical origin thing again, and it's awkward because it's trying so hard not to look too much like Tony Stark.
Mm. Oh, thank you, Robert. And then Out of the Shadows is also 2016.
Yeah.
So
which not only did no one like, but no one remembers, and for good reason.
Yeah, and I didn't watch that movie until you did the commentary on it.
Yeah, and it's insane. And some of those choices are bafflingly entertaining in hindsight, but it was an absolute chore at the time.
Oh yeah, that movie's way more entertaining than the first one is.
No, it is.
But it's not good.
And it was nice. It's kind of nice the ways that it leans into the absurdity of 87, but the things that it like doesn't care about or doesn't like is very strange. Just the way it treats the Shredder, we talked about this before, is so odd.
Mm-hmm.
And the way it treats Casey Jones is also very odd.
Yeah. No, it's a very weird movie.
And also kind of has an obligatory sequel thing.
Yeah. Well, and that's got like nobody liked our first movie. And here's something kind of it's Amazing Spider-Man 2.
It absolutely is that. But it's odd because the first movie is arguably kind of like tonally somewhere in between Amazing 1 and Amazing 2. So like it's already weird, and then when you get to 2, it's just like kind of bat stuff weird.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. But the only difference being that it's not like shared universe crazy like Amazing 2 is.
And it's one of those, I guess I had to say franchises, even though they only, ended up making the 2 movies, that at the time feels like, if you're a big fan of that franchise, it feels like the worst thing that ever happened to it. Because you're like, oh no, this is what Turtles has turned into. And then you realize how disposable these franchises are as soon as a movie doesn't hit. So sometimes they keep making more for no reason I understand. Like with what's happening with Star Trek, which feels like not enough people are watching that for them to be making as many series as they are. But I don't know when we're ever gonna get away from that. But with Ninja Turtles, at the time was like, oh god, you made them like huge and hulking, and for a minute they were supposed to be aliens, and all that stuff that people complained about. And then we all forgot about it very quickly. And then possible reboots started being bandied about really quickly. You had people that were really angry about how not very good to awful, depending on who you talk to, that Hellboy reboot movie was. And nobody saw it, so they're already putting out something else unrelated. So like a bad reboot doesn't always mean that the whole thing is done. The best thing that can happen to a franchise that let me reformulate that. I guess I should say the worst thing that can happen to a beloved franchise, I guess, is you have a like really long running canon that fans love and don't want to see rebooted, and it can't be rebooted, or at least it can't be rebooted forever. So we keep adding stuff to it that we're stuck with, and then the best you can hope for later is we decanonicize like pieces of it. So when you have something like Ninja Turtles that has so many different, or Hellboy, I guess to a lesser degree because we haven't made a bunch of different movie franchises, but when you have something that has like not the same kind of long-running history with a singular canon, you can get away with a bad one, even if it's 1 or 2 or 3 movies, because at some point we'll just reboot and make something hopefully better.
Well, I mean, that was the big talk I had, in school, talking to people with DC. Because remember, a lot of people being like, "Well, we're getting DC movies, so it's good." And I'm like, "Nah, like if you let them fail, they'll stop making them and make something better."
Yeah.
That's the hope.
Yeah, I've never
been on the like you settle for what you have, like unless it's like fine. Like there's been franchises where I'm like, to a degree I'm settling, like once something better comes later I look back and go, okay, like to a degree I was kind of settling, but like it also had merits on its own,
Yeah, well, and once we got really spoiled with superhero movies where they became mainstream and regular people were watching them, it stopped making any sense to me whatsoever that people would just settle for mediocre. As soon as you have Iron Man and Dark Knight, I know we always go back to that. Like all bets are kind of off. You shouldn't settle anymore after that, because you don't have to. You can. I know I say this all the time, but you can have your cake and eat it too. You can have like fun escapist, off the page, or at least relatively off the page superhero stuff that's also about something and makes you think and can be like a quote unquote real movie. Why settle for less than that? And when I say real movie, just with whatever it is the thing is trying to do. Like if it wants to be a parody and a farce, be a really fun, creative, intelligently made one.
Yeah, exactly. Should we get into, I guess, X-Men? I'm trying to think of. I don't know if we have enough time to get into Civil War and stuff, but I mean we can also tackle that too.
Yeah, let's go ahead and hit on Civil War for a little bit because we only have 12 minutes left.
Okay, we got it. We got 12 minutes for Civil War.
So this whole hour will just be 2016, but it's a bigger year than I think either of us were giving it credit for. Where does Fant Four Stick fall?
That's 2015.
Oh, we've already passed that. We haven't really talked all that much about that. I will say real quick, just to kind of double back for a second on that. I was talking about the whole Twilight Zone thing last episode, and I said that one of the only things that was kind of immune from that, besides the fact that I just couldn't have predicted that Deadpool would be that popular or that it would even get made, was that, apart from that, Fox was kind of immune to that. But then you did have Fant Four Stick. And I kind of forgot about that part of it, where that is part of this, where nobody could have predicted how that turned out. And is one of the oddest, most baffling things that ever happened in any genre.
Yeah, and have you ever looked into the original script for that movie? It's insane. Where it had like Annihilus, Doctor Doom, Galactus, Mole Man, like all these things like peppered throughout. It's crazy.
I hadn't heard about Annihilus. I knew Galactus was supposed to be there. So you're saying it would have been like Aquaman?
Yes. Well, I think the idea, if I remember correctly, was they go to the negative zone like area. I don't think they call it that in the movie, but like wherever they go, and Annihilus is like the ruler of it, and Doom gets like left off with him, and the four get back, and then we go forward in time, and I think Doom has killed Annihilus and like taken over, and then he comes back, and I think before he shows up, there's like a little thing with Mole Man that's like when the time jumps forward and they're the Fantastic Four, there's like a little thing with him there, and then the end would have set up Galactus coming.
Jeez. Instead, in the final version, you just wound up on a Star Trek soundstage planet with no one there.
And every time anybody says Doom, it's awkwardly like ADR'd.
So let's talk for 9 minutes about Civil War, and I guess I'll start with just kind of bringing up the point I mentioned last video, that it always seemed really interesting to me that, and kind of an interesting coincidence, that you had two like superhero against superhero movies the same year, and you suggested that was more or less on purpose.
Yeah, from what I understand, because they announced that movie in 2014, BVS. and Marvel goes, "Oh, like let's do Civil War." Do you also remember when they announced that when they gave the fake title?
No.
Yeah, they gave like the Phase 3 slate, and it was every movie that happened and didn't happen, with Inhumans.
Yeah.
And at the beginning, it was Captain America, Serpent Society,
Oh, I forgot
and
about
then
that.
at the end they played a clip from Age of Ultron where Steve like breaks the log in half, and then it cuts to black and it's like Civil War, and it replaces Serpent Society.
Wow, I forgot all about that.
Yeah, I remember the BVS one in that like really vividly.
Do you think?
Oh man.
Do you think they're kind of like showing a bit of truth in the like behind the scenes process with that, where like they were gonna do Civil War later, but then when BVS was announced, they went, ah, screw it, we'll just make that the next Captain America.
Well, Civil War is like a disaster being made.
Which is so nuts because it turned out pretty well.
Yeah, like there's like 800 versions of the third Captain America movie that they're like all simultaneously working on
I didn't know that.
in case like different things fall through. Like there's versions without Spider-Man because maybe we won't be able to get them. I think there's versions without. Yeah, I think there's versions without Black Panther. I think early on the creative committee or whatever didn't want Iron Man to be in the movie.
Why? Like, just because it's a Captain America movie and they didn't want him to take the spotlight too much?
He's too expensive. I don't know.
Oh, sure.
Because Civil War also, like one of the big miracles of that movie is that's not a part of Downey's contract. Same with Homecoming.
Yeah.
They were like, "Hey, are you willing to do this extra thing?" And he was like, "Yeah, that's fine."
Yeah, which is crazy because it's not like it's a minor role or anything. I mean, that's a major supporting role.
No, he's the main villain of that movie.
Yeah, I mean, at the risk of getting into another argument about the title, I wonder if you went in and clocked it, how much more screen time Steve Rogers gets over Tony Stark in that movie.
I think it's like a couple of minutes.
Yeah, I remember it's got to be close.
I think it's like 45 for Steve and like 40 for Tony. But I also remember back in the day, people talking about like, oh, they're not announcing it yet, but after that movie, they're going to announce Iron Man Civil War, and it's going to turn out to be a two-parter, which obviously didn't happen.
Yeah.
But I remember that being like a lot of talk at the time.
Well, the main reason that I was always kind of weird about that title, and I don't think that like putting Avengers in the title really works either, but it still feels to some degree it kind of like an Avengers movie to me, and they sold it that way certainly.
They definitely sold it as an Avengers movie.
But part of the reason that was always kind of weird to me is because Tony Stark is only the villain of that movie depending on who you side with. And the movie does a pretty good job of letting you make up your own mind, which is what I liked about it over the comics.
Yeah, but I like in terms of just basic structure, like he's the main antagonist of that movie. Like certainly you can say like I agree more with Tony. I don't know if anybody really does. I don't. That movie's so like not about the Civil War thing that I don't know if it's like fully like, oh, I'm on this side or I'm on that side. Because movies, it doesn't really care about it at the end of the day.
You think?
Yes. Which is why
I think you and I kind of see that movie differently.
Yeah, because I see it as a Captain America movie.
Well, and the thing, and like I respect that, but like I've watched it a lot of times trying to look at it through that lens, and I have a hard time with it. I feel like he gets buried a little bit. And
I think the only reason though that people say the Avengers thing with Iron Man is just because he's a hero we've had that's had his own movies. Like if it weren't for that, people would go, yeah, he's the villain of this movie.
But I think it's also because
the Avengers also get taken out like 40 minutes before that movie ends. Like it's not like the Avengers are there through the end. Like the main movie is about Cap and Bucky, and then Tony.
The problem is, first of all, that movie opens with a setup that is directly bouncing off of the events of Age of Ultron, right?
Yeah,
and that makes it feel more Avengers-y because you're talking about fallout from the very end of that last movie. You've also got scenes I like establishing where Avengers characters are now, where we kind of lose Captain America for a minute, like with Vision, Scarlet Witch, and stuff. Which again, like I feel like Civil War is as much like an Avengers 2.5 as Avengers was like Captain America, or it was like Iron Man 1.5 and Captain America 1.5. That's how I see that movie. It's not about whether or not all those characters get full on character arcs. It's about the fact that they're there and they're they're inching forward a bit. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but I mean, every Captain America movie is a team movie. He leads his Howling Commandos team in the first one. He leads his like smaller Avengers team in the second one, and then he leads like a full team that also like get taken out in his third movie. Like it gradually grows with it.
Yeah, I guess that's true. It's easy for me to lose the team thing with the other two movies in a way that you can't with Civil War at all. Like they feel more singularly focused on a single character. Even though there's teams in them. Like, okay, the Howling Commandos are there for how long?
Well,
like,
yeah, the Howling Commandos, I think we all complain.
I think you can you can retroactively make that point, but you wouldn't have been thinking that in the theater.
Yeah, but I mean, Winter Soldier's an ensemble in that same way, though, too. Like, his team gets probably as much to do, and in certain ways more to do than they do in Civil War.
But that's, I don't know, like, I guess 3 people technically is a team, but like it doesn't feel like a team movie.
Yeah, but I mean, we're also
It feels like he's got a couple of sidekicks. Like it feels like a singular character movie with a supporting cast.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
unlike something like Black Widow, which is just straight up a team movie.
Yeah, and I mean, like I think that's just what Civil War is too. Like it's none of those characters steal the show at all. They get moments, obviously, but like,
I think collectively they do though, which is why Captain America and the title just never totally sat well with me.
Fair enough, but I mean the entire plot is about Steve and Bucky, and dealing with Zemo, who's a Captain America villain.
Yeah, that's
the only
true,
thing that's the only thing that's not.
But like the first Avengers movie was a Thor villain. What's your point? Like,
yeah, but it's not about Thor. That's one of my issues with that movie. Is Thor doesn't do anything. Captain America like is the driving force of Civil War.
I guess I have a hard time with the premise that Iron Man is the villain of that movie. Like I get
he absolutely is. He's the main antagonist.
Okay.
I
don't see it that way entirely. Like I get that.
I think just structurally,
I get that
from
Captain America's perspective. But the problem is, if he's the villain of that movie, he's also the villain of Ultron, and that's an Avengers movie. Do you see what I'm saying?
Not entirely. I don't see how it compares to Age of Ultron in that way.
Well, he created Ultron, and Ultron
he creates Ultron, but he's not like the main thing stopping the protagonist in Age of Ultron. Like, he's a flawed protagonist that creates the villain in Age of Ultron. In Civil War, Iron Man is the main thing that is in Captain America's way. He's the main thing stopping the protagonist from doing what he wants to do.
Yeah, I don't know. It's more, to me, it's more of a dual protagonist piece where like neither one of them is totally right by the end. Like, and again, like I respect the way you're looking at it. I don't even think you're wrong. It's just I never came to that. So when you come at me with, but obviously it's that, yeah, no, but that's I've seen the movie 6 times. I never had that with it.
Yeah, I don't know. I think that's just how it breaks down.
Yeah, like when you get to the end of that and like Steve like gets a shield broken, and they have the giant fight they have, and he makes the mistake of not telling Tony about his parents and all of that, which I've got issues with some of that as a plot point, but whatever. Like he's not totally in the right either, and it's finally the story that kind of breaks him, and and gives him that opportunity for change that he has to make. He doesn't get through it unscathed like he does before. Which I guess you could make the argument that if Tony Stark is the villain of that piece, he's the only villain that could do that. Like, it's not a bad read on it. I just don't know that it's the only read.
Yeah. Well,
I also think that it is more about it to me was more about the actual Civil War of it all than it was to you.
That's more. I've always seen like
some of it is what you latch onto, right? Because when you say, well, it's all about Cap and Bucky, like that's the A story, but that's not the stuff that resonated with me. So I mean, there's a lot going on in that movie, and I think some of it is what grabs you more than more than the other stuff. Mm-hmm. And so if we're looking at two different movies, that's fair because they're both in there. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, no. The reason why I say
we end up having a Civil War of our own.
The reason why I say it's like less of that Civil War-y thing is that a lot of that kind of drops out by the end, and it becomes more character focused on what they're doing.
Well, that's what I like about it.
No, I agree with that. But that's what I mean when I say like it's not like as Civil War-y as you'd maybe expect, which is a big thing that everybody made fun of it when it came out. Was Civil War was just a fight in an airport. Which is funny, but like that is also what I like about it, is that it's not really about that stuff. Like that is just the catalyst for the story.
Yeah, well, and that's where the levity is, and it's maybe too bleak of a movie if you don't have the kind of classic 60s Stan Lee stuff. The people that complain that scene is too long, I'm like, when you've got that many characters all going at it, I don't really know how else you do that. Like, I feel like going the other way, you'd be like, well, God, we really shafted all these characters because we made that scene too short.
Well, and that's like self-indulgent in that kind of like fan servicey way where I think it's fine.
I think so too.
It goes on too long, certainly, but like,
and it might be one of those things that kind of ruins too much moving forward. You know what I mean? Enough. Like, we talked about this with Guardians 2, where not Guardians 2, but Guardians also, where some of their biggest accolades end up being their worst enemies, because when they're really popular, they lean too far into certain directions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, Civil War is a movie. It's pretty good. It's neither the Russo's best film nor their worst. It's pretty good.
Yeah, but I don't know. I still like it a lot. I don't think it's.
Oh yeah, I'm mostly joking. I like Civil War a lot. Like
I think Winter Soldier remains their best film, but some of that's just the stuff that I'm there for, and I really appreciate the character work in that movie.
Well, Winter Soldier's a tighter movie than anything they did after that. But I mean, they're juggling so much more with their movies after it.
Yeah, and it's impressive that they could do that without that turning into a 4-hour movie. I mean, if Zack Snyder makes that movie, it's a 12-hour epic.
Mm-hmm. No, and that's always the thing that's impressed me with Civil War and how it handles things, is that, as we've discussed, like, I do think that is very much a Captain America movie, but it also has all these things that I think it balances well enough that it all washes out in the end.
Well, we are past an hour again. And so, I don't know. We got through 2016. Good job.
Oh yeah.
Look at us.
X-Men Apocalypse happened. It sucks.
Yeah.
We're done 2016.
I've said my piece on that before, and I guess I've said my piece on all this stuff as far as... What's that?
So we did a whole commentary on it.
Have you and I done a commentary on Apocalypse?
Yeah, you were like, I want to start doing rewind commentaries.
Oh yeah, I was doing those after I would write one, or after I do the off the cuff things. Or maybe just after.
We only did the one. It was
we did it. We did it with Batman and Ninja Turtles also.
I don't even remember doing that. Okay.
Yeah. Well, what I can't remember is if I did it with Apocalypse. I don't know if I did it right after I wrote one. I was in this mode.
That was a big thing.
I was in this mode for a while where I was trying to write one, and then I would do the commentary like a week later. And yeah, we did that with Batman and Ninja Turtles also.
Well, the best thing about that was you messaged me like earlier on in that day, and you're like, "Hey, I'm gonna do this. Do you want to come on?" And I was like, "Oh God, like I haven't seen that movie in so long. You just wrote this entire thing on it, and Okay, and then I ended up watching that entire trilogy like before we did the video.
Oh my
But like,
god. I
it was
forgot
like
about that.
3, 2, 1. Like I watched them in reverse.
It's hilarious. Well, we
Like,
can
how
maybe
much time do I have? Okay, I can watch the second one. Okay, how much time do I have?
we can backtrack and focus a little bit more on X-Men next time.
Well, we
We
can
have
also jump in on some apocalypse stuff when we get to Dark Phoenix too.
well, and what I was gonna, yeah, I don't know how much of a footnote that'll also be, but like I was gonna say when we go to 2017 and when we hit Logan, it'd be pretty easy to backtrack and knock
Well, I
out
think
some of those other
Dark
X-Men
Phoenix will
things.
probably be pretty big just for being the end of the X-Men.
I guess it's easy for me to forget that's even a movie.
Yeah, I mean, I
It
don't
was
blame you.
it was so just kind of like tacked on. Like nobody saw that. They did the weird Dark Knight thing where they thought they were cute and not putting X-Men in the title, like somehow it would be a sleeper drop and more people would see it that way. I'm convinced that that actually the main reason they did that was just because the letter X is in the word Phoenix.
Mhm.
That's really the main reason they did that. Where they're like, oh, we don't need no stinking X-Men. We've got an X already here. Did they even put a circle around it? I can't remember.
Yes, they
I
did.
thought they did that.
But I think you're missing the fact that there will be an entire part of the series dedicated to Dark Phoenix and New Mutants.
Yeah, we can do a whole part on movies that came like 4 to 6 years after they were made initially.
Oh God, yeah. Let's plan that.
We'll talk about New Mutants and Flash at the same time.
Let's do it when Blade comes out.
Right. Yeah, we'll just wait and do that history video when we finally get Blade.
Mhm.
That movie, look for that in 2029.
This video will not exist.
Yeah, we're never making that. No, there's still a lot of ground to cover, obviously. I feel like we're going to be doing these until we're old men. But I'm honestly, this is part 8. I'm hoping we can knock it out with 10. But I don't know if that's possible because we just spent a whole hour on 16.
And 17's also a giant year, so
Is it? It's got Wonder Woman. It's got Justice League.
it's got Justice League, Wonder Woman, Guardians 2, Ragnarok, Spider-Man: Homecoming, Logan.
Yeah, that is a mixed bag year. And I mean,
Not
more
as bad as 2016.
say that again.
Said not as bad as 2016.
Well,
But,
for me, there's more good things in 17 than bad. I know you and I don't agree on Wonder Woman, but like I think as we're looking, I think there technically is more bad in 16 than there is in 17.
yeah, which I like. I said,
is
I
that
always
right?
think 16 is being like this great year, but while we're talking about it just as a year, like there's a lot more bad in it.
Well, I've always looked at it as a 50-50 just because the big main things are BVS and Civil War, and you know Civil War is one of Marvel's absolutely best movies in my mind, and
Yeah.
BVS is a catastrophe.
Well, I think I have a habit of going, okay, like these are the ones that I really like, and when there's a few in one year, I go, oh, that was a great year.
Yeah.
But my mind like drops out the ones I don't care about. So it's like, oh, 2017 is a great year. It had Homecoming and Guardians 2. What a great year for comic book movies.
Yeah, and I
There's
guess for
nothing
me,
bad
the
about
stuff
it.
that sticks with me are kind of the things that became big projects for the channel.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
Where it's like, because I have the kind of, for lack of a better word, like, professional aspect to this, where I'm not just watching them to watch, for fun, just to watch them. So it's like BVS was a big deal, and a lot of people watched our videos on that, and it was bad. But I thought I sort of liked the ending for 5 seconds because they adapted Death of Superman, and then Civil War was huge, but the other direction, and in some ways felt like what BVS ought to have been if they had to fight.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
Where it's like, well, make it about an ideological difference, and then it's interesting.
Yeah,
As opposed to just this guy's got powers, I can't trust him.
I think if we're gonna make this a 10 video series, 9 will have to be an hour, and then 10 will be our annual. That's oversized.
We'll make it an omnibus.
Hmm. Yeah, exactly.
No, it'll be more than 10. Especially if we go ahead and do that last video where we talk about the future.
Yeah, you gotta think about the future.
Well, thanks everybody for watching, whether you watched live or after the fact. Hope you enjoyed it, and we will be back in probably a couple weeks for another one of these. I want to thank our patrons for supporting us here on the channel for Superhero Rewind and the rest of what we do here. If you'd like to become a Patreon producer for Superhero Rewind, you can join the $10 tier, patreon.com/geekvolution. You get to hang out with me and Austin once a month on Discord. You get to talk to us over the Discord. You get to help us pick movies for the Superhero Rewind commentary project, which we're going to try to bring back next month, I think. I don't want to promise anything, but that's my hope right now. And other cool perks there. So once again, patreon.com/geekvolution, and you also get your name read at the end of everything with Superhero Rewind in the title, including this series. And I'm going to start all the way at the bottom again so that I don't leave out the $10 folks. $10 and $15 tiered people get mentioned very dramatically here, and I'm going to do that right now. Thanks a lot to all of our Patreon producers and our patrons at large, including Wendell Jones, this guy, The Day Ghost, Subject 879, Miguel Rodriguez, Michael Austin Gulick, Matthew Brody, Kareem Roberts, Jonathan Campbell, Jacob Schneider, Hot Soup, Damon Begay, Adam March, Tim Drake, Thomas Edgehill, Super Billy, Stone Gasman, Michael McAllister, Michael Martin, Matt Bat 68. I wish we had 3 Michaels in a row. John Matthew McLean, Chichira, Joe Turner, Jeff Niederhofer, Hayden Spring, Goofster 123, Dr. Hello, Chewbacca's Lover, and finally, One Reply. Appreciate you guys. Thanks for sticking around and helping us out with things here on the channel.
I miss when it ended with, and Zack.
Yeah. Zack, come back. We need a one-syllable name. Come back, Zack.
I'm sorry, I made fun of you every time.
That's why he left.
That is why he left, yeah.
Well, it was funny when it started or ended with Zack, really.
Exactly.
When you start at the top, you're just like,
Zack.
Thanks a lot to Zack. Like, he's going to find a way to make one syllable a 3-syllable word.
Exactly. Well, when you pronounce it like that, it sounds like, what is it, Gak or whatever, that like slime toy?
Oh, yeah. That was a big deal in the 90s.
Exactly.
Or at least the commercials led you to believe that. I don't know how popular that toy really was. I didn't have it.
Oh, I don't know if I had Gak. I had something like that.
I think everybody in the 90s had some form of ooze.
Well, and then you're like, oh, I want that. And then you get it and you're like, this is certainly ooze.
You realize there aren't a lot of applications?
Yeah, what are you going to do with it?
Even when you get those sorts of things with action figures, like playsets and things, it'd be fun for a second, and then you're like, I don't know, this kind of gets everywhere. I don't know if it's worth getting out every time.
No, slime is like the toy equivalent of playing, like, jingling keys, where you get it and you're like, ooh, and then you like...
Almost immediately you're wondering why you asked for that for Christmas.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't really know what I wanted that. And then you start going, well, I don't know if you were self-aware enough at like 8 years old, but I was going to say, you start going, wait, maybe it was advertising that just made me think I wanted this.
Yeah, exactly. Like, oh, that commercial where the kid was playing with slime and he was like, I love slime. You were like, yeah, I like slime too. Until you have it.
You know, when I eventually make the supercut of this, it's going to be great that we have a part in the middle of this video.
We just ramble about slime.
We talk for 5 minutes about Gak. Okay, thanks a lot for watching, everybody. If you're watching live right now tonight, stick around. We're going to be doing another stream right after this. And in the meantime, I was Captain Logan, and this was Austin, The Day Ghost. Austin, thanks again for sticking around and doing these with me.
Yeah, no,
even though we're
like slime,
though we're fighting over Civil War, I feel like we can still be friends. I feel like we don't have to. Yeah, I'm not gonna sign your stupid accords, but I feel like we can still be friends.
So I was gonna say I was gonna break a log to show my power over you, but for some reason we both went to I'm Captain America. So I guess I'll be Iron Man.
Teddy just put in a super chat that I guess I have to read and elongate the slime discussion.
We
Thanks
also
for the
have to
super
yell
chat.
it 'cause it's also in all caps.
Oh, okay, all right. That's true. It is all caps. I heard you people talking smack about slime. I don't take kindly to people disrespecting slime.
See, no, I think
No
I think it should be more
punctuation.
like, I heard you people talking smack about slime. I don't take kindly to people disrespecting slime.
Well, I didn't know I had to do a voice. You said yell.
Yeah, but I mean, it just goes with it. He loves slime.
He's just a he's just a 90s Saturday morning cartoon character now.
Exactly, he's a Captain Planet villain. Well, because when you think of the word slime, like you have to say it in like a villain voice, because you hear that word and you're like, Jameson, you slime.
You slime.
You're not gonna be like, you slime.
Ah. Oh, that's slime.
Yeah,
Hate that.
exactly.
Hate that guy. That's only when a radio DJ becomes a supervillain. Anyway, thanks a lot for watching, everybody. We'll see you next time. Bye, folks.
See ya.